Hi there, everybody. We're on with Peter Mendelsund. Open book. Very good to be with you. Hello, S.R. O'Brien. Hello, Maggie, Barbara Jenko, Diane Wood. Very good to be with everybody. Linda Sullivan. Hi there, also Elise. We have a wonderful novel and very interesting novelist and creative spirit to speak with tonight. Yes, and he does look a little, let's just tell our distinguished guest, Peter Mendelsund, who is author of this wonderful novel, Weepers, that we're only getting you from the nose down.
Oh, strange. Does
Yeah.
that help? I still look super squeezed. I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
Let's see. Yes, that is great. There's a little bit of a delay between real time and what we see
Okay.
on the feed. So let me confirm that I didn't just give you good advice and then bad advice. So whatever you were doing to get from where you were to where you are, there you go. Great. Keep doing what you're doing.
All right. I'm only seeing your chin.
Well, that must not be a pleasant experience.
It's okay. I can count your beard hairs, though. In any event, this wonderful new novel, Weepers, it's set in the near future that might be closer than you think, because, of course, even just this week, I read once again how I believe half the white-collar jobs in the industrial world are going to be disappearing, soon to be replaced by AI and various machines. But not a cowboy poet named Ed, because he's found enduring work in a small, albeit dying town in the American Southwest. He is a professional weeper. They are organized, Local 302. It's a union of workers who were hired to mourn at funerals. And it's the story of this group of people and Cowboy Ed. And it's been written by Peter Mendelsund, the novelist and designer, who's also creative director of The Atlantic. So thanks very much for joining us, Peter.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Tell us
and everyone else.
Tell us
as long as you can see all of me.
We can see all
well,
of
not
you.
all of you, okay? But I mean,
okay. It's too much to ask.
Shane Harris says you look great.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
So these people who are hired to cry at funerals, are they acting or are they acting out for us?
Well, I think it's a little of both. It depends to some extent on the talent of the weeper. You have, just like in any profession, people are real good at it and people that are less good at it. I think the true talents are those that are able to actually feel empathy and sorrow for people they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And there are those who are just warming the seats and filling them up. And there are those that are just sort of paying testament to the deceased and making the deceased seem more popular than perhaps they were in their actual life. So you have this sort of range, everything from acting to the real, what I call sensitives, those who are able to feel true compassion and exhibit it.
Yeah. These, of course, this is a centuries-old tradition, professional weepers, or at least weepers for hire.
Mm.
What made you decide to use this group of people? And I'm usually reluctant to use a term like community, but this really is a community.
Mm.
Use this community of people to try and set up this near future.
The reason why I had the idea for this sort of cohort of mourners was because while I was writing the book, I was in a very serious depression, and being a particularly sensitive person to begin with, and being someone who's drawn to particularly sensitive people, I, at one point in the depths of depression, just began to wonder a little bit, well, why am I built this way? And sort of despaired over it. But there was also a moment where I started to think, is there not just is there a reason, but is there a purpose? Who are we? Who is this group of people? Depression aside, like I said, I've always been sensitive, and like, what is this? Which is not just a case of of being particularly fragile. It's also a case of being very alert to what's going on around you, specifically the emotions that are around you. It means your mirror neurons are firing. You can really reach out to what is happening to the people around you. And it occurred to me that this particular moment that we're living through, it seemed like there's a real paucity of that. I don't see a lot of that going around. And, I say a fair amount that I think that this age that we're living through, if the 19th century was the age of like the big affect of joy and sorrow, and if the 20th century was the age of anxiety, then I think we're in the age of anger and anesthesia. So really the idea is, what would it be like to professionalize this sensitivity? And then the idea came to me. And like you said, it's a very old tradition. It's in the Bible. As you said before, the Romans practiced it. It's still practiced in South America and Asia. In Oliver Twist, there's a line about what they call mutes, which are specifically children mourners, which is, I think, particularly affecting to think about. But in any case, it's a magic realist conceit to think of this group in the United States, in the Southwest, in a union, all of these things being normalized is, it's obviously not something that you actually see in real life.
Yeah. And there's you have a young man who comes into the group, and he seems to be particularly gifted. Tell us about him.
Well, as I said, you have this sort of spectrum of ability, and this spectrum exists, I guess, within the human spectrum of the ability to sympathize and feel empathy. But this kid who wanders in, who is nameless, he's referred to as the kid throughout the book, and has no particular past that we know of, is not particularly talkative, is kind of a cipher. But as soon as he starts showing up at the funerals and wakes, and various other services with these weepers, the people at the services begin to sort of lose their mind in sorrow. And clearly, the narrator starts to put it together. There's something about this kid that he's kind of got a blast radius. Like whatever he's doing, he makes people feel a lot, perhaps more than they should. But it's a kind of messianic tale in the sense that he has this miraculous power, which extends, like I said, beyond the normal human ability to do this. And the question is then raised, is it for good or for ill?
Yeah. We're beginning to get questions. And,
yes, we are.
Let me just, we'll ask Maggie to, S.R. O'Brien had a particularly telling one, I thought.
Yes, well, he's got quite a few, and I think we've answered one of them, right? From where did this come from, right? Where did this book come from? And perhaps...
So the one about AI.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes with this, right? Will the preponderance of AI prompt a response of exaggerated human emotions in areas other than grief and depression?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think just even the knowledge that you are communicating with the knowledge that you're communicating with something that isn't in fact sentient, I would say, or something, let's say, that's not human, actually flattens your emotion. And I think, even if you look at interactions on social media, those interactions are also flattened. Like the particular emotional bandwidth, because of the nature of what's mediating the conversation, means that you're given a few options. It's hard to really express true joy or true sorrow on social media. I think we've seen that, in fact, social media encourages certain kinds of emotion like anger. And I think in a way, AI will do the same up until the moment where we cross the threshold where perhaps nobody knows who they're talking to anymore. Although I would still contend that the screen itself does a fair amount of flattening, that no matter who you're talking to, the fact that you're talking to a rectangle with, simulacra, I think that means that it's actually harder to feel in the way that you do when you're face to face with someone in the corporeal sense. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. May I ask, Peter, because you were very open on our show a few weeks ago, and here as well have used the word depression. May I ask what set it off? What stays with you? Do you live with this every day? Was it
Mm.
set off by events? Oh,
Um, I have been suffering from depression since my 20s. I'm 57 now. And there had been, in the first decade, maybe one or two, next decade, three or four, there was a definite increase in these depressions. And the one in 2020, 2021, almost into 2022 was different in intensity than any that I'd suffered before.
this was the
And
pandemic, of course.
yeah, it started before and then continued on through quite a bit. And, I describe it as a dangerous depression. And I knew, having been depressed before, that this was the one I felt like I couldn't get myself out of. And it was truly scary. And I think I just tried to army crawl my way through it and eventually got the help that I needed. Although there was a long time where I was seeking help in less healthy ways. And I don't do that anymore, which is great. And I have good doctors, and I have not been depressed now. I mean, it sounds like I'm an alcoholic talking about my last drink. I think it's been 2 years now, maybe 2.5 years, and I'm feeling pretty good. But it is definitely a fact that the books came out of that period of just intense desperation. And, this thing that depression does, which thins out your skin, it makes the smallest possible thing just, you start to leak buckets, and the crying doesn't alleviate anything. But that doesn't really answer your question. Your question was sort of why. And, I think it's a combination of, um, you know, coming to terms with certain aspects of yourself that might be buried. You have to do a fair amount of excavation. And there are certainly very difficult things in my past that I had to think through and talk through. But, brain chemistry. Um, and, I was answering a question for an interview with Psychology magazine today, and they were asking me a question about brain chemistry uh, and creativity and how much of that comes for your brain chemistry. And of course, I'm like, this is one of the oldest questions. Are you like, what
Yeah.
constitutes a self? And I actually don't have an answer for that. But I think, it's heritable, some of these things. And my father was struggled with many of the things that I struggled with, and, had made attempts on his own life. And, so you can see very clearly that it's a disease. So I think it's a combination of factors.
There's an old novel of the 1960s I read years ago called A Fine Madness, in which a poet named Samson Shillitoe, I think in the movie, in fact, he was played by Sean Connery before he was 007. And he doesn't want to get help because he thinks that's what makes him an effective poet.
Oh, boy, do I know that feeling. I mean, I remember the first time I was a doctor said, here are the pills you need to take. And I really did go down that rabbit hole. I mean, first of all, the rabbit hole of selfhood. Like, if I am well, if I am happy, am I still me? Like, just sort of a fundamental ontological question, which was, of course, quickly followed by the question, well, I've been making art, music, writing, whatever it is, my entire
Yeah,
life.
we should explain. You were a concert pianist. You were creative director of the Atlantic. You're a designer. Have done I don't know how many book covers. Yeah.
Yeah.
As I said to you on the air, for a guy who's depressed, you're really productive. But please,
I know it's true. That's just another neurosis that I'm sure we can get into if we want to. But yes, the question of what's the wellspring of all that creativity, and is it sort of the cliche that one has to be I think there's something about the idea of the artist on the outside looking in, and so necessarily estranged, and that sensitivity allows you this ability to be able to reproduce. And I don't really buy into that. And as soon as I did start taking medication, did start feeling better, and I'd go so far as to say happy, um, it didn't affect my productivity at all. And the interesting thing is, like, there's some quiddity, there's some essence that's outside of brain chemistry, I believe. Like, there's a ghost in the machine, right? And I still feel very much like myself. I just feel like a self that's doing a lot better.
Good.
Yeah, it is good.
And I think I asked you this on our show, but what's the balance between being, for you, a designer, a classical pianist, a creative director, a novelist, or is that the balance? You have to keep all these oars going from the boat.
Well, let's put it this way. I think, design was my job after I left the piano, and I've been playing the piano, which is, I don't know if you can see it. It's right there. That's where I spend the majority of my free time. It's sort of, I've been playing since I was 4, and I played all the way through grad school and conservatory. And my wife and I, then we had a kid and needed more money and health insurance. And I was absolutely untrained in anything other than scales and arpeggios and, modal counterpoint and like these things that are not really, not great assets in the marketplace.
Oh, people just throw money at that. But
yeah. People throw money at Baroque counterpoint. And I remember sitting on the floor with my wife then, and just doing that kind of exercise. Well, what else do you like to do? I mean, I was sure I wouldn't be able to get a job as a temp. And basically, what happened is, in that fog, my mother reached out to me and said that one of her friends' Scrabble partner's husband was a book jacket designer, and I should just go in and talk to him. And I did so. He worked at Alfred A. Knopf. His name's Chip Kidd. He's probably one of the most famous book designers in the world, I would say, probably. Although I didn't know that, and it made the interview really, really easy because I was just like, what is this guy who does this silly job? And
you just put a title on a book. All right. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And the thing was,
maybe a picture of the author. Okay.
Yep. Exactly. I just thought it was, I say this, and it's absolutely true. I had never considered that a book, I mean, I knew that it physically had a jacket protecting it, but I never actually looked at it. What I looked at is the author name and the title of the book. And in fact, even during that interview, I mean, he worked at Alfred A. Knopf in the 90s and the early aughts, and the books that were on his shelf were and he had just finished designing the cover for, is it My Name is Red? It was Orhan Pamuk, and I just read it, and I couldn't stop talking about it. And I think he was like, who's this guy who doesn't want to talk about design? It was really the books that lured me. And as it happens, it was right around 9/11, and a designer had left for the country, didn't want to live in the city anymore. And so there was an opening, and they were like, why don't you come in? And then, and I didn't know what typography was. I didn't know what a Pantone chip was. I had to learn. But I learned pretty quickly, and then I did it for 15 years, and it was a real career. And then all of a sudden it wasn't, because I wanted to write. All this time I've been playing the piano. Again, the piano for me is, I don't know. It's my religion. It's everything I care about, frankly. I have to do it every day. And I do several hours a day and many, many hours on the weekends just to rearrange my synapses. I mean, we're talking about brain chemistry. I feel like if I don't have a certain amount of time at the keyboard, my mind starts to do strange things.
Peter, I don't point this out to your deficit, but I just noticed you did not do the cover to your own novel.
No, I didn't. Interesting. Yeah. There was a period when my first novel came out. There it is. What's funny is I asked for, I said something to FSG. I said to the designers, I mean, something that every designer just hates to hear, which is, all I want is you to make the type big. Like, I just want it to look like a book that people will think is important. So this very, and the reason why I didn't design it myself is when my first novel came out, the reviews all began, designer Peter Mendelsund's new book. And I wanted someone to say Peter Mendelsund's new book. It's very hard to people don't really want to allow you to change lanes. The funny thing about that cover, though, that you just held up is, it was sent to me. It was the first one I saw. I was like, fantastic. And
Thomas
then,
Colligan or Colligan?
yes, Thomas Colligan, really nice young man. And then I realized,
Oh,
that
I
it's a
think I see the
kissing cousin of one
inspiration.
of my absolute favorite books. That's the first paperback edition, which I didn't realize until later. It occurred to me, and then Michael Chabon pointed that out on Instagram, and I know that he's a huge lover of that book also. So that made me particularly happy. But yeah, I've been trying to kind of shed the designer in me to be able to be more of the writer, and so it's less of a balancing act than you would think.
A last question coming out of your novel, as I think I told you on our show. And I say this carefully. I mean, you have a group of weepers, professional, at funerals. Inevitably, but not just inevitably, makes you contemplate, well, what's after this? And I like the formulation you came up with because it doesn't rely necessarily on a religious version, although it wouldn't close that off. But I believe you raise it by saying, what do we open our eyes to next?
The narrator is a very folksy narrator, and he's talking about...
This is Ed, the cowboy.
This is Ed, the cowboy, and he's talking about... I don't have the lines by heart, but he's talking about sort of his, the encroaching death, and he just sort of idly says the line, when it all winks out. And then he sort of pauses for a second. He thinks, whatever winked closed without winking open again. And I think it's a very good point. And that's the metaphor that he uses. And for him, it is a visual metaphor, but he does, like all of us, he wonders. He doesn't have any sureties, but by the end of the book, after we've experienced all the miracles, I think the miracles have led him to a place where his mind is just far more open, and he's more receptive to what might be possible.
Well, Peter Mendelssohn's fine new novel is Weepers. And I'm so glad that we could talk to him about it again. Thank you very much for being with us, Peter.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I will tell our open book fans, open book community, that tomorrow night we'll have a promo. And very good to be with you. And thanks very much for joining us in our open book. We're going to read this on all kinds of platforms. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.